A luxury boutique manager thought she could embarrass Sandra Bullock for looking too casual, completely unaware of who she was dealing with. But the moment Keanu Reeves walked in, everything changed. What he did next left the entire store in stunned silence, and what followed turned into a scandal no one could have predicted. Before we reveal the shocking twist, tell us where you're watching from. And if you love gripping stories like this, make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow we have another unforgettable story just for you. The boutique Eloise Paris wasn't just a store. It was a fortress of wealth, a place where only the elite belonged. Behind its discreet facade lay a world of quiet opulence. Leather seating imported from Italy, silk rugs hand-woven in Morocco, and displays lined with designer pieces so exclusive that most people had never even heard of them. Everything in the air, the soft jazz, the faint scent of expensive wood and leather, whispered a single, unspoken rule. If you have to ask the price, you don't belong here, and making sure that rule was enforced. Helena, the boutique's sharp-eyed manager. Nothing escaped her gaze. Dressed in a sleek black tailored dress and sky-high designer heels, she wasn't just selling fashion, she was selling status. And she would do anything to protect the boutique's reputation. That's why, when the soft chime of the doorbell rang and a woman stepped inside, Helena noticed immediately. A white hoodie, plain sweatpants, a black cap pulled low over her face. Instantly, Helena knew what she was dealing with. A tourist, or worse, a window shopper. The kind who wandered in out of curiosity, snapped a few pictures, then left without spending a dime. And that would not be happening in her store. She straightened her posture, her fingers still resting on a diamond necklace she had been adjusting for a VIP client. Then, without hesitation, she stepped forward, cutting off the woman's path. Sandra Bullock barely glanced at her, her fingers trailing over the luxurious fabrics as she browsed, moving at a leisurely pace. She loved fashion, always had. But what she hated was the power games people played around it. "Can I help you?" Helena's voice was polite, but cold. Sandra turned to face her, tilting her head slightly. "Oh, thank you. I'm just looking." Helena's smile didn't waver, but she had already made her decision. This woman didn't belong. "I see," she said smoothly. "Just so you're aware, everything here is made to measure. Nothing is placed on display by chance." It was a carefully crafted message. "The store is out of your league." Sandra pressed her lips together, suppressing a smirk. "I imagine it isn't." Something about her tone caught Helena off guard. Most people took the hint and left. But this woman? She stayed. And then, as if pushing the limits of Helena's patience, she reached for a dress, a breathtaking piece from the newest collection, with a price tag that only the wealthiest could afford. She examined it with casual ease, as if she had every right to. That was enough. Helena turned slightly and gestured toward Clara, a junior employee by the counter. Clara hesitated. "Ma'am?" "Keep an eye on her," Helena murmured, low enough that no one else would hear. Clara frowned. "Why?" Helena sighed, as if the answer should be obvious. "Clara, she might ruin the experience for our real customers." Clara said nothing, but a knot of unease twisted in her stomach. Something wasn't right. A mistake was being made, one that Helena wouldn't realize until it was far too late. Sandra, meanwhile, continued browsing, her pace unhurried. But now she could feel the stares, the weight of judgment pressing against her. What they didn't know, what none of them had any idea about, was that the moment Keanu Reeves walked through that door, everything was about to change, Two VIP clients lounged on one of the boutique's plush sofas, their voices hushed but laced with amusement. "Did you see that woman? How did she even get in here?" "A hoodie and a cap. She looks like a lost tourist." The words were barely above a whisper, but Sandra didn't need to hear them. She could feel them, the sideways glances, the barely concealed smirks. It was always the same game. But Sandra never reacted too soon. She waited. She watched. Helena, however, had no patience for waiting. The presence of an unfitting customer could not be tolerated, not when her elite clientele were starting to notice. She needed to end this. Now, with sharp, deliberate steps, she walked up to Sandra and stopped just beside her. A perfectly trained smile graced her lips, but her eyes held something else, something cold. "Ma'am," she said, voice smooth as silk, "I noticed you like that dress." Sandra turned slightly, meeting her gaze, unfazed. "Yes, it's beautiful." Helena nodded, as if humoring her. "I agree. But perhaps I could suggest something that better suits your style?" Sandra's eyebrows lifted just slightly. "My style?" Helena's smile remained frozen in place, but there was a stiffness in her posture now. "Yes. We have some more casual pieces, something that might make you feel more comfortable." From behind the counter, Clara's heart pounded. She'd seen Helena do this before, subtle, cutting, enough to push people out without causing a scene. But this time, something was different. Sandra gave a small, knowing smile. "You think I wouldn't be comfortable in this?" Helena blinked, caught off guard again. There was something in Sandra's gaze, steady, unwavering, that made something in her chest tighten. "I just meant that... You think I can't afford it?" The words were spoken softly, calmly, but the effect was instant. A ripple of silence spread through the boutique. A few attendants suddenly became very interested in rearranging the shelves. The VIP clients, who had been whispering just moments ago, had gone completely still, watching, waiting. Clara held her breath. Helena, however, was not one to be rattled. Not by anyone. "Ma'am," she said smoothly, "I was simply suggesting something more appropriate." Sandra studied her for a long moment, and then she laughed, software controlled, but a laugh nonetheless. Helena felt something cold trail down her spine. "I see." Then, as if the conversation had never happened, Sandra turned away and continued browsing. And just to test the waters, to see how far she could push, she reached for a black silk dress. An exquisite, jaw-dropping piece with a price tag that could make even the wealthiest pause. Helena's entire body went rigid. She inhaled slowly, controlling her movements as she stepped forward, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Then, stopping just beside Sandra, she let her gaze sweep over her, once, twice, before she smiled. A slow, venomous, condescending smile. "Are you sure you want to try on that dress?" Sandra arched an eyebrow but said nothing. Helena leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "I just mean, this particular design requires a certain posture, a grace that brings out its natural elegance, and, of course, the right accessories." Her gaze flickered pointedly, once to Sandra's baggy sweatshirt, then to the simple black cap covering part of her face, and then, with a quiet, amused hum, Helena stepped back, waiting, daring Sandra to respond. But what she didn't realize was that in just a few moments, her entire world was about to be turned upside down. Sandra caught the attack the moment it left Helena's lips. "I could suggest something more appropriate for your profile. A direct hit. No subtlety, no pretense." Sandra's fingers tightened slightly around the silk fabric, but instead of reacting, she did something else. She smiled. just a faint curve of her lips. Because now, she was certain, Helena had no idea who she was. Still, she wanted to see how far this so-called manager would go. She turned to Helena, tilting her head slightly. "And what exactly do you mean by that?" Helena's smile stayed perfectly in place, but her eyes, cold, sharp, gleamed with something else, superiority. Just that this kind of piece was designed for women who know how to wear it. Sandra narrowed her eyes. Women who know how to wear it. Helena didn't flinch. If anything, she doubled down. Yes, women who understand the sophistication of haute couture, who recognize the cuts, the fabrics. She made a vague, dismissive gesture. Women who don't need help understanding the value of a dress like this. Sandra inhaled slowly. She was used to being treated like royalty, used to the whispers, the stares, the reverence. But today, in this place, she was being treated like nothing. And that said everything about Helena. Without looking away, she asked, "You think I don't understand?" Helena's smile widened, razor sharp. "I think some people mistake this boutique for just any store." Sandra let out a small, amused laugh. The disdain in Helena's voice couldn't be more obvious. "So, in your opinion, I shouldn't be here?" she asked, feigning curiosity. Helena played innocent. "Oh, I would never say that." But then she smiled again, tilting her head slightly, voice lowering just enough for only Sandra to hear. "Some of our clients might feel uncomfortable." There it was. No more pretense, no more veiled insults. Helena was making it clear. You don't belong here. Sandra pressed her lips together, exhaling slowly, as if considering. Helena thought she had won. She thought Sandra would feel humiliated, give up, walk out. But then something unexpected happened. Sandra looked Helena dead in the eye. Her voice was eerily calm when she spoke. "Funny, because when I walked in, no one offered me champagne. The boutique froze. Silence crashed over the room like a thunderclap. The assistants stiffened, glancing at each other in panic. The VIP clients stopped whispering, stopped browsing, stopped everything, because they all knew the rule. Important clients were always welcomed with a glass of champagne. But Sandra had been given nothing. For the first time, Helena's mask cracked. A flicker, just a flicker of realization flashed across her face. She paled, just for a second. But she recovered quickly, straightening. "Oh, that must have been a mistake. Of course, I can have a glass brought to you right away." Sandra smiled, but it wasn't warm. It wasn't friendly. It was final. "No need," she said softly, voice sharp as a blade. "I've already seen everything I needed to see." Then, before Helena could recover, Sandra turned to Clara, the young assistant who had been silent this entire time. "Do you think this dress would look good on me?" The room held its breath. Clara's gaze flickered between Sandra and Helena, hesitation thick in the air. But then, she took a deep breath and answered, "Yes, it would look incredible." A crack split through Helena's carefully built world. For the first time, she felt it. The ground shifting beneath her feet, control slipping through her fingers, and then humiliation. Her own assistant had just contradicted her, in front of everyone. Helena refused to accept it, refused to lose. So she did what she did best. She attacked. Stepping forward, she forced a cold, calculated smile. "Well, since you're so interested in that dress, I can call one of our sales assistants to help you in the fitting room." The words were polite. The tone, anything but. The underlying message was clear. "If you insist on embarrassing yourself, I'll make sure to watch you do it." Sandra caught on instantly, but before she could respond, Helena turned to Clara instead. "Clara, please take this piece to the fitting room and see if we have an appropriate size." Sandra raised an eyebrow. She knew exactly what that meant. Helena wasn't just sending the dress away, she was sending a message, a subtle jab wrapped in polite words. You don't have the right body for this. You don't belong in this world. The boutique held its breath. Clara felt a chill creep down her spine. A few VIP clients exchanged glances, some even smirked. Not because they found it funny, but because the scene unfolding before them was too entertaining to look away. Sandra remained still, the dress still draped over her arm. She glanced around. The attention wasn't just on her anymore. It was on Helena, too. Some clients relished the humiliation, but others looked uneasy. Because if this woman, whoever she was, could be treated like this, then it could happen to anyone. Helena saw it. She felt the shift. But arrogance wouldn't let her stop. So she went further. "You know, ma'am," Helena began in a falsely casual tone, "we have a more affordable store just 3 blocks from here. Perhaps you'd find something there that suits your style better." The blow landed hard. Even Clara sucked in a breath. For a moment, the boutique felt ice cold. Sandra let out a quiet, disbelieving laugh. "Did you just suggest I go to a cheaper store?" Helena didn't flinch. "I just think some clients prefer something more practical, more comfortable." Then she smiled, tilting her head, and delivered the final strike. "After all, luxury isn't for everyone." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the VIP clients didn't know where to look. The sales assistants averted their eyes. Clara felt her stomach drop. Sandra, however, smiled. But it wasn't the kind of smile you wanted to see. It was slow, dangerous. And then, without a word, she took the dress, draped it over her arm, and started walking. Helena frowned, confused. "What are you doing?" Sandra stopped in front of the register, looked at the cashier. Then, locking eyes with Helena, she said, "I'll take it." The entire boutique held its breath. Helena let out a short, scoffing laugh. "Really?" Sandra nodded. "Yes. After all, luxury may not be for everyone." Then, with deliberate slowness, she reached up and removed her sunglasses. "But I'm pretty sure it's for me." And just like that, everything changed. A sharp gasp cut through the silence. Someone whispered, shaken, "Oh my God!" Because now, with the sunglasses gone, everyone recognized her. Sandra Bullock, one of the most powerful women in Hollywood, a global icon, a woman worth over $250 million. Helena turned white. It hit her all at once. She had just publicly humiliated one of the most famous actresses in the world. And now, every single person in the boutique knew it. The weight of it pressed down on her chest. And then, the boutique doors opened. A soft chime echoed through the air. But this time, it sounded different, heavier. And when he walked in, the boutique stopped breathing. Slow, deliberate footsteps against the polished floor, a long black coat swaying slightly as he moved, hair slightly tousled, effortlessly careless. But his eyes weren't surprised. Because he already knew what had happened, knew who he was looking for. Without hesitation, without sparing anyone else a glance, he crossed the boutique, straight toward Sandra. Helena's entire body tensed. The VIP clients were frozen, hands covering their mouths in disbelief. Clara felt her heartbeat hammering in her ears. And then he stopped right in front of Sandra. Without a word, Keanu Reeves pulled her into a hug. A real hug. Firm, solid. The embrace of a long-awaited reunion. Sandra closed her eyes for a second, letting out a soft breath. Then she smiled, genuinely. Helena felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. This wasn't just Sandra Bullock anymore. This was Keanu Reeves, and he had just embraced her like an old friend. His voice was low when he spoke. "It's been too long, Bullock." Sandra pulled back slightly, still smiling. "It really has." And in that moment, the boutique was no longer a battlefield. It was a reckoning. "Far too long, Keanu," Sandra murmured, a knowing smile tugging at her lips. Keanu finally turned his gaze toward the boutique, his sharp eyes scanning the room. He took in the tension, the uneasy glances of the sales assistants, the way Clara's hands trembled slightly at her sides. And then his eyes landed on Helena. She froze. Because in that moment, Keanu Reeves didn't need to ask what had happened. He already knew. Then, with deliberate calm, he turned back to Sandra. His voice was smooth, but beneath it lay something razor-sharp. "I hope they treated you well." The weight of his words sent a ripple through the boutique. The VIP clients exchanged glances. Clara bit her lip. The sales assistants held their breath. Everyone knew the truth. Helena opened her mouth, desperate to salvage the moment, but nothing came out. The damage was done. Sandra let out a quiet, almost amused laugh. She met Helena's eyes, unflinching. "Oh, yes," she said, her voice dripping with icy composure. "Unforgettable." The boutique fell into a suffocating silence. The words weren't spoken in anger. They carried something far more dangerous, absolute certainty. A faint murmur broke through the tension. One of the VIP clients, an elegantly dressed woman, leaned toward a sales assistant and whispered, just loud enough for all to hear, "If this is how they treat Sandra Bullock, imagine how they treat the rest of us." The impact was instant, a shift, almost imperceptible, but undeniable. Helena felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Then her phone vibrated. She barely registered it, too consumed by the realization creeping over her. The career she had built, the reputation she had curated, the power she had wielded so effortlessly, it was all slipping through her fingers. Swallowing hard, she forced a polite, shaky smile. "Miss Bullock," she started, clearing her throat, but her voice wavered. I had no idea who you were." Sandra crossed her arms. "And that justifies something." Helena opened her mouth but stopped, because for the first time she heard how hollow her own words sounded. "No, She struggled to recover. It was a mistake, a misunderstanding. Keanu's expression remained unreadable, but the slight raise of his eyebrow was enough. A misunderstanding. The boutique seemed to hold its breath. His voice was calm, low, but it carried the weight of a sledgehammer. Helena's stomach twisted. She inhaled shakily, scrambling for control. "I just wanted to ensure our experience was selective." Sandra let out a soft chuckle, shaking her head. "Oh," she said, tilting her head slightly. "So now you get to decide who deserves respect." And just like that, Helena knew. She had already lost. Helena felt her breath hitch. She had lost. But she hadn't seen the worst of it. Keanu said nothing, yet his silence carried more weight than words ever could. His expression was clear. Justice had been served. The boutique, once her domain, now felt like a prison. The sales assistants no longer looked at her with admiration. The VIP clients no longer whispered her name with respect. Then her phone vibrated again. She didn't need to check. She already knew. On the other end, the boutique owner had seen the videos. The fallout had begun. Her career, everything she had built, was crumbling. Helena swallowed the lump in her throat, her fingers trembling as she lifted her phone. A notification flashed across the screen. Boutique owner. "Helena, we have a serious problem. Call me immediately." Her heart pounded. But before she could react, something else happened. A VIP client, an elegant woman who had been quietly watching, stood up. She reached for her designer handbag, glanced around the boutique, and said loud enough for all to hear, "I don't shop at places that mistreat their customers. I'm leaving." And just like that, she walked out. Without hesitation, without looking back. A beat of silence. Then another client rose to her feet. Her voice rang through the boutique. If this happened to her, it could happen to any of us. A murmur spread. Whispers turning into something more dangerous. Sales assistants exchanged uneasy glances. Doubt, once a quiet undercurrent, now filled the room like a rising tide. Helena felt it slipping. Control, reputation, power. And then, the final blow. Clara. She took a slow, deliberate breath. And then, without a word, she reached for her boutique name tag. Her fingers curled around the metal, and she placed it on the counter. "I can't work here anymore." The sound of the name tag against the glass was deafening. Helena's world cracked open. Her breath came out in a desperate whisper. "Clara!" But Clara didn't hesitate. She turned, not to Helena, but to Sandra and Keanu. "May I walk you both to the exit?" Sandra smiled. "Of course." And just like that, the doors to Helena's kingdom opened, and they walked out, leaving her behind, alone. But the worst was yet to come, and Helena wasn't ready. Across the city, a quiet cafe. Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves sat at a small table, the hum of conversation filling the air. Across from them sat Clara, now a former boutique assistant. She still looked overwhelmed. Sandra took a slow sip of her coffee, watching the young woman thoughtfully. "So, Clara, what's next for you?" Clara hesitated, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I don't know. Maybe I'll look for something new, somewhere I can actually learn and grow." Keanu leaned back, a small smile playing on his lips. "Turns out, I know a few people who could help with that." Clara's eyes widened. "Really?" Sandra smiled. "We like helping the ones who deserve it." Then, Sandra's phone buzzed. A message. She glanced at the screen, and then she read it aloud. "The boutique manager has been officially fired. The video now has 20 million views." A quiet moment passed. Sandra and Keanu exchanged a knowing look. Then Sandra set her phone down, her voice calm, certain, the final words that would close this story forever. "Some people think luxury is power, but real power is knowing how to treat people with respect." Keanu nodded. Clara smiled, and across the city, in a dark and silent apartment, Helena was learning that lesson the hard way, because status is never eternal. The judgment of the world is swift, unforgiving, and in the end, luxury is nothing without dignity. If you loved this story, there's more where that came from. Click the screen to explore more stories of hope, compassion, and resilience.